The bombed-out cities of the East Coast burned as the military attempted to contain the virus, but it was already too late. Hordes of the undead flooded places that were once full of life: parks, stores, streets, fun fairs. And while these common infected were dangerous on their own, there were some who were twisted into something far worse. What triggered these alternate horrific mutations? What made the special infected so lethal? And how different were they from the common infected? In this video, we explore the special infected that tormented and massacred the survivors in Left 4 Dead. Over the initial 2 weeks of the green flu spread, many questioned what had actually happened. Was this a man-made weapon, nature's defense mechanism against an ever-growing population, or was it an act of God? The Civil Emergency and Defense Agency discovered that the virus infected each person differently. For some, the transformation into a mindless zombie took about 4 days. For others, it was 3, 2.5 hours, even 5 minutes. Some were bitten, some were not. From the side alleys of Fairfield to the Overland Mercy Hospital, all the way down to Liberty Mall in New Orleans, just 2 weeks after the first infection, CEDA found that around 63% of those infected became aggressive, mindless husks wandering aimlessly near the place they had turned. But what about the other 37%? Their teams reported 7 distinct, deadly and horrendous variants of the infected. There was also an 8th they had not reported, but due to her nature, it is likely those who encountered her never survived to tell the tale. As the survivors of this virus traversed the overrun streets of Fairfield and beyond on their way to a safe haven, some heard the distorted, harrowing cries of a woman. These sobs were filled with so much pain and sorrow, but they did not come from a human. She was something so much worse. For those who investigated, her echoing cry was a curse, a torment for both the survivors and the witch herself. She only wanted to be left alone in her misery, but this siren call naturally attracted anyone hoping to help someone in danger. Sensitive to light, the witch wandered slowly, covering her eyes as she searched for shelter. By night, she dropped to her knees and cried in solitude. This variant's transformation was tame compared to the other special infected, but it was still horrendous. Every witch encountered was extremely thin. Their eyes glowed red, their teeth were razor sharp, and their hands stretched into claws with fingernails like talons. In those early days, as survivors fought through doomed regions, many would have heard the cries of a witch and investigated, only to find a woman in despair. It was unfortunate that these infected looked human, and when she did not respond to any questions of concern or acknowledge the survivors, it would have made them more curious. Reduced to a primitive state, the witch always resorted to a growl to warn anyone around her if they got too close or pointed a flashlight at her. She was not like the other infected. She did not actively seek out anyone to harm. It was only if the survivors ignored her warnings that she unleashed her rage, and honestly, they kind of deserved what they got. When startled, the witch targeted only the person who had ignored her cautions and chased them down at an incredible speed. She threw anyone or anything that was not her prey aside, and once she caught them, the witch pinned her victim with inhuman strength and tore them apart. This was a lesson to anyone not to startle a witch, and once she had punished her target, she fled and returned to a desolate isolation and grief. Looking back, it is pretty easy to see how CEDA had missed the witch in their initial listing of special infected. They looked and sounded human, and for those unlucky enough to have angered one, they would have died in terror as those glowing red eyes looked down at their bloodied body. Although Cedar was unable to identify this variant, some of the survivors did and warned others of them on the walls of safe rooms. Stay away from the ones that cry. I saw one rip apart 10 people. Listen for them and walk around. No, sneak up behind them, and if they don't hear you coming, they are sitting ducks. Interestingly enough, at the Dusatel Sugar Co. Mill, many survivors warned others that this region had a lot of witches, and there was a reason for this. They were oddly attracted to the smell of sugar. So, what triggered the green flu virus to transform someone into a witch? Well, it has not been confirmed, but there are theories. The witch was one of 2 specific female-only variants, so being born female is absolutely a factor. From their constant state of sadness, perhaps they had suffered devastating emotional trauma, their crying a manifestation of deep distress, a loop of pain and fear, unable to move forward. Trauma often drives people to isolate themselves, and this change only elevated that tendency to the point where she grew enraged when disturbed. Her mutated state simply triggered or amplified the body's natural stress response. It is possible that the witch's behavior reflected the effects of prolonged stress and depression, with her mutated form linked to changes in stress hormone levels. Just as chronic high cortisol in humans can lead to emotional numbness, withdrawal, and unpredictable rage, so too did the witch suffer. Of note, there was a witch discovered at a riverbank in New Orleans. It was here that a wedding turned into a scene of horror when the green flu arrived. In her despair, the bride transformed into a witch and remained in the very place she was meant to be married. Elsewhere, a whole group of witches were discovered locked inside of a boat. They had all transformed together, which suggests that maybe if one witch was created, other women in close proximity transformed too. What was certain is that while these encounters were absolutely horrendous to survive, a smarter survivor could simply avoid any interaction and move on. The witch was something any survivor could easily avoid if they were smart, but the tank was the complete opposite. This special infected made up approximately 3% of the infected population and could be heard long before it arrived. Just like the common infected, they were incredibly aggressive, but the tank had the strength to wipe out entire groups with a single blow. When it spotted a target from a distance, this titan roared. To any human, the cataclysmic sound of its fists slamming the ground, the vibrations that followed, and a sense of dread was a sure sign that something terrible was coming. But what made them so loud? When the virus took hold and mutation transformed their bodies, they became completely unrecognizable. At approximately 12 feet tall and 800 pounds, their muscle mass and bone strength increased dramatically in the upper body, especially in the chest and arms. Because of this horrific change, they had to rely on their hypergrown swollen arms to move, much like a gorilla used its arms for locomotion. As the swelling continued, their heads sank into their chests, with their neck and even jaw seemingly swallowed by muscle. Fueled by rage and brute force, tanks attacked any uninfected on sight, but what kind of damage could they actually do? Their massive size gave them immense strength, and they were surprisingly intelligent in how they acted. They knew that they could not outrun a human, but they could pick up heavy objects such as cars, trash cans, or even slabs of concrete and throw them at their targets to incapacitate them. All the survivors could do, once hit, was watch as this massive creature launched everything out of the way, slammed towards them, and then pummeled them to death, laughing and banging their chest as it did so. To the human, this would have been terrifying and an almost certain fate of a messy death. Once they picked a target, just like the witch, the tanks did everything they could to bring them down. If they were against a group, his tactic was to focus on one at a time until they were all dead. So how were survivors meant to escape or take down a tank when they encountered one? The tank's increased and hardened muscle acted as a natural shield to protect them. All the humans could do was stay at a distance, avoid whatever he threw, and just unload as much lead as they could until it finally fell. There was no other way. And the saddest part? These creatures still retained a trace of the humans they once were. When defeated, they seemed to understand their fate, sometimes giving a final cry of no when they realized they were going to die. So, what made someone become a tank? Every tank encountered was male, making biological sex an immediate factor. Beyond that, the cause is unknown. Perhaps these men, before infection, had an extreme hormone imbalance or had used steroids excessively, which was only amplified when the green flu entered their system and transformed them into something completely different from their former selves. Regardless, it was tragic. The distant cries of a witch or the roar of a tank gave survivors in heavily infested regions a chance to prepare for or avoid an attack. But not every special infected gave their victims a warning that they were close. It was always in the shadows that the hunters waited, silent and unseen, stalking their prey until the perfect moment to pounce. Like the other specially infected, the hunter had become a perfect killing machine, driven by pure instinct and rage. Like the witch, these hosts retained a twisted, human shape through their transformation, but their skin erupted with boils and scars. Their eyes looked scratched out, ringed with decaying flesh, while their hands and nails had stretched into savage, animalistic claws. The most unsettling part of their mutation was found in their legs. With strength far beyond any normal human, the hunter could leap stories into the air and drop from rooftops without hesitation. Making up about 9% of the infected population, these silent killers were a common threat to survivors. It often began with someone wandering away from their group. Then came the scream of a hunter, soaring through the air as it pounced. By the time its target realized what was happening, they were already pinned to the ground, helpless, staring up as the claws of the eyeless creature tore into them, their blood and guts everywhere. Though deadly, hunters were one of the easier special infected to put down, but only if the victim's group reached them in time. They also appeared to coordinate with the common infected, thinning out larger groups until someone was isolated, ready to be pounced on. Groups were often blindsided by hunters that could leap 100 feet at a time, though even these killers needed a moment to recover after such a fall. The hunter was another male-only special infected, so the host was always male. They were found toned and muscular, and their outfits hinted at a background in parkour. Their sleeves and hems were taped down to cut air resistance, letting them move even faster. These hosts seem to have been among the healthier members of the population, people who cared for their bodies. Athletes, soldiers, anyone who kept themselves in peak condition, twisted into hunters, driven only by the aggression of the virus. Now, this is where we get into a little bit of theory. As the eyes are missing on the hunter's character model, the common idea is that the hunters are actually blind and use their screech kind of like echolocation to map out the region around them. I would like to think that they are blind and use this method, but Valve is well known for hiding anything that cannot be seen by the player to free up resources so that the game runs better. So maybe they did have eyes, but they were never created on the character model. Despite this, they were absolutely terrifying to encounter. making up about 6% of the special infected. The boomer was probably the most disgusting of them all. These monstrosities appeared as both male and female, but for anyone cursed to become one, the fate was gruesome. As survivors crept through heavily infected zones in search of a safe haven, those who listened closely might have heard the unmistakable sound of gurgling and burping in the dark. The transformation into a boomer was grotesque and intense. Their bodies swelled, covered in revolting growths that ballooned larger with every passing second. Although their bodies expanded, they gained neither super strength nor speed like the other infected. Instead, they became more fragile as they bloated to the brink, swollen with a sticky green bile. This bile, a mixture twisted by the virus, was not just filth. It had a profound effect on the infected around it. Wherever they appeared, boomers shuffled slowly with the hordes, careful not to touch anything that might rupture their fragile bodies. These infected were not the most intelligent, and some would even jump from high places, bursting apart on impact. If a survivor got too close, the boomer's instinct was to vomit its bile onto them, and they had a great aim. Unlike the spitter, this bile was not acidic, but it was just as dangerous. The mixture was foul and thick enough to blind its victims. As for its profound effect, it likely contained pheromones that sent every infected in the area into a frenzy. As soon as a boomer's bile hit any surface, whether it struck a human or not, the local common infected would flock to it. Unable to contain themselves, they swarmed the spot in a frenzy and tore apart anything marked by the bile. It fueled their aggression, and if a human was unlucky enough to be covered in the substance, their only hope was to lock themselves away. During their research, Cedar discovered the properties of boomer bile and, with some foresight, managed to bottle the substance. For Cedar, this was likely meant for further research into the boomer and the green flu itself. For survivors though, any bottle of this substance became the perfect tool to lure hordes of infected away just long enough to escape. The sight of a boomer shuffling through the dark was enough to make even seasoned survivors pause. One wrong step and the air would fill with a haze of green bile and the roars of the summoned infected hordes. While almost a certain death if someone was soaked in the nasty bile, boomers were considered one of the easier infected to kill. Because of their fragile bodies, a single shot could destroy them. They simply exploded, nothing left but a stain on the ground. As with the other variants, it has never been confirmed why some people became boomers, but they were the only special infected found in both male and female forms. The common theory is that boomers originated from individuals who experienced significant weight gain before the infection. Their noticeably bloated appearance supports this idea. Additionally, since the liver produces bile to help digest fats and other nutrients, it is possible that a higher caloric intake before infection contributed to the boomer's increased bile production. With so many common infected, alongside the special infected already mentioned, it was a wonder that anyone survived as the virus spread further and further. But there were even more horrors to come. At around 4% of the infected population, the spitter was one of the most harrowing infected to encounter, and even to look at, and was the second of the 2 female-only special infected variants. Although rarely seen in comparison to the deadly hunter or tanks, spitters were responsible for countless deaths among those unfortunate enough to cross their tragic path. Just like the rest of the infected, spitters were victims of the green flu virus, but their physical transformation, especially their faces, was horrendous. The spitter's mutation forced her to endlessly produce a green, corrosive substance, and while her skin glowed, she was not immune to its effects. As she produced acid, it leaked from her mouth as she walked and ate away at her jaw and lower face until her mouth was stretched wide open. She was forced to keep her mouth open at all times as acid dripped out. Her neck grew, forcing her into a permanent hunched position to accommodate it. This truly was a curse. As the spitter continued to exist, her body and organs slowly eroded away as more acid built up inside of her. All she could do was let the acid leak. We can only hope that whatever remained inside of her retained no trace of her former humanity as she burned from the inside, never finding relief. For anyone who crossed her path, the sight of glowing acid or the sound of it sizzling on the ground was a warning. The only wise choice was to avoid her entirely. Despite her torment, she was still infected, still fueled by rage, and just as dangerous as the rest. When a spitter encountered an uninfected person, her first and only instinct was to gather as much acid in her mouth as possible. Then, as her name implies, spit it at them. When she spat, the acidic ball held together in midair because it was coated in a substance that kept it stable until impact. The second thing to note was her aim, which was impeccable. Upon impact, the thin membrane shattered, coating the surroundings as acid burned through everything it touched. For living creatures, the pain would have been excruciating. Survivors have noted since that a spitter preferred to keep her distance and let the common infected finish off her weakened victims. Her body constantly produced acid, and within about 20 seconds, she could unleash another volley with startling accuracy into a crowd. Fortunately for survivors who encountered her, the spitter was easy enough to kill as long as they avoided her acid. But why did the virus twist its hosts into something like this? Just like the witch, only females became spitters. As for why they turned into this, some believe that a pre-existing medical condition such as an ulcer may have mutated into something truly horrendous. The manic, deranged laughter of someone unseen is one of the most unsettling sounds in the world. In a zombie apocalypse, it became so much worse. Any survivor who had faced a jockey before knew they had to be extremely careful. Even a safe situation could turn disastrous in seconds. Making up about 4% of the infected population, the jockey variant of the special infected did not seem as sinister or dangerous as a hunter or a tank at first glance. The jockey could inflict damage on its own, but its true danger came when it was surrounded by other infected. That was when its talents became truly deadly. As the virus took hold of the host's body, they descended into madness. Their backs hunched painfully, and their fingers and toes elongated into gnarled claws. They appeared physically weak, but they were far from it. Their grip became incredibly strong, perfect for the way they targeted their victims. The jockey's technique was, in some ways, similar to the hunter's. It waited in the shadows, above its prey, and watched for the perfect moment to strike. Yet, unlike the hunter, which waited in absolute silence, a jockey could not help but giggle when it spotted a victim. That manic laughter was a sure sign to anybody nearby that something was lurking above. So, how did survivors come to call it a jockey? With their enhanced strength, jockeys would drop onto the shoulders of their victims whenever they could and refused to let go. They clawed at their victims' faces as they steered them, guiding their movements just as a rider controls a horse. Jockeys were seen by many as one of the easier infected to survive against, at least when moving with a group. Each special infected so far has been mentioned on its own, surrounded by the common infected. The jockey was the most dangerous when other special infected were nearby. Despite its maddened state, it showed a disturbing level of intelligence when causing harm. It knew to direct its prey into the acid of a spitter, the path of a boomer, the line of sight of a tank, or worse, into the sanctuary of a lone witch. Unless the victims had someone close enough to tear the creature off, death came quickly and horribly. Faces were shredded by filthy claws while the jockey's manic giggling rang in their ears. Survivors could do nothing as the creature steered them towards agony, whether it was a pool of acid, the fury of a tank, or the embrace of a witch waiting in the dark. When the victim finally went still, the jockey would slip away, laughter trailing behind, already hunting for its next victim. As a male-specific variant, only males were transformed into jockeys. It is commonly believed that individuals with pre-existing spinal deformities or neurological disorders seem to be the most vulnerable to this mutation. The virus preyed on these weaknesses, twisting the spine beyond recognition and unraveling the mind, until all that remained was madness and suffering. If the primal charge call of a charger was heard, it was already too late. Making up about 4% of the infected population, they were among the most aggressive and deadly of the infected. While boomers and spitters attacked groups, these mutants used their brutal enhancement to single out one victim, scattering the common infected, humans, and environment during. Often mistaken for tanks, they underwent a brutal transformation. Tanks could be outrun if their projectiles were avoided, but these creatures moved with terrifying speed. Mistaking one for the other meant almost certain doom. As the virus took hold, their muscle mass and bone density surged, but only in one arm that became something of a battering ram, leaving the other a frail, useless appendage. Unlike the tank, it could walk normally, and more than that, it could reach terrifying speeds and knew exactly how to use it. Once the charger started to accelerate, it could not be stopped, and it did so for one purpose: to charge. Survivors moving cautiously to avoid a witch, scanning shadows for a hunter, or watching for any of the many horrors spawned by the green flu, would suddenly hear it. When a charger locked onto its target and began to speed up, it roared fiercely. If the victim had not sensed its presence before the roar, their fate was sealed. In less than a second, the target was seized as the creature slammed into them, throwing anything and anyone in its path until crashing into something solid. It showed no regard for its own safety. Bruises and scars marked its arm, revealing an indifference to pain. Every inch of its body screamed from the trauma it had endured. Scars, bruises, dents, missing teeth, and blunt force trauma covered it, but none of it mattered. It still charged survivors, and like the tank, it retained some cognitive awareness. It spoke when it sensed death was near, whether this was a manipulative tactic or tragic confusion. Despite being the aggressor, it pleaded with those nearby not to shoot or harm it. Any survivor who heard the roar was faced with a cruel decision: either throw themselves clear of the charging monster, or if seized, pray that their teammate could hunt down the place where they had been dragged and rescue what was left. The charger, like the tank, was built like a fortress. Its thick skin formed a natural armor as it slammed victims into the unforgiving ground until there was no more movement. Like the tank, the charger's host had to be male. But why one man became this nightmare instead of that remains unclear. Some theories suggest physical trauma, steroid use, or a muscular disorder affecting only one side of the body. There is another theory as to why one arm was bigger than the other, but that tale is best left untold here. Making up about 7% of the infected population was the final special infected, the smoker, and what a challenge they posed to any survivor unfortunate enough to cross their path. Like jockeys and hunters, these creatures prefer to remain out of sight, stalking their prey from the shadows as they moved from rooftop to rooftop, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. A foul, choking smoke trailed behind them as they moved, each leap and landing marked by a wet, hacking cough. The mutation preserved their human shape, but twisted it into something monstrous. They became towering figures, sometimes looming even taller than a tank. The process left them warped and ruined, their humanity almost unrecognizable beneath layers of decay. Sickly tumors and boils erupted across their flesh. In some, a single growth consumed an entire side of the face. Yet, the most nightmarish feature was the tongue, twisted by mutation until it could lash out across 50 feet. For those who use the metric system, like me, a Brit, that is about 15 meters. The tongue grew long and powerful. The smoker could whip it out with terrifying speed like a chameleon, latching onto a victim and winding around the chest or throat in a single choking motion. From their favoured high vantage points, smokers would drag victims into swarms of common infected, into the reach of a witch, or straight into other lurking dangers. Their goal was never a quick kill. These infected hunted to maim and cripple, leaving their prey helpless and doomed, a living offering for the Hordes. On occasion, a survivor caught by the smoker's tongue would die suspended from some high perch, unable to move. Others suffered crushed bones and internal bleeding from the sheer force of its grip. These pale creatures were deadly if not spotted before they struck, their tumor-riddled bodies making them even more grotesque. Some were even reported to have two tongues. One specimen was discovered with several, a result of additional mutations caused by the virus. As for how someone became a smoker, just like most of the special infected, this variant appeared only in male hosts. The most common theory is that the mutation was triggered in heavy smokers and those suffering from cancer. There are also theories about the tongue itself. Some believe that what the smokers used to ensnare their targets was not a tongue at all, but instead a length of intestine forced out by the mutation. Despite their abilities, smokers were easier to kill than tanks or chargers that just ate ammo, but for anyone caught in a smoker's stare, the experience was nothing short of terrifying. The infected never saw the uninfected as we do. Through their vision twisted by the virus, carriers and those who had avoided the virus appeared as something demonic, warped beyond recognition. Perhaps the infected, even the special variants, believed they were defending themselves against monsters. Yet in fun fairs, broken cities and beyond, survivors moved with constant caution. Every step demanded vigilance, ears tuned to the distant cries of a witch, the rattle of a smoker's cough, the sudden shriek of a hunter, and countless other threats hiding in the dark. What is certain is that these special infected brought terror and agony to countless people who only wanted to survive. And even now, these 8 variants of special infected are only what we have seen or what have been reported. What if there are more out there? I absolutely loved putting this video together to explore the different variations, what made them different, and why they may have become their variant was so interesting. I love deep diving into these topics, and while it does feel natural to throw in those little bits of information and go on tangents about the green flu, how it spread and all that good stuff, I forced myself to stay on topic with just the special infected variant instead. If you are interested in a dedicated video on the green flu, I have pinned my last Left 4 Dead video about now. Left 4 Dead is just an interesting timeline, and as I said in my last video, the Charger is absolutely my favourite special infected. You know everything is about to be chaotic as soon as you hear that charge call. A lot of information about the variants of the virus are filled with theory and speculation because Valve have not confirmed a lot of the why questions. As a lore person, it is frustrating at points, but then again, with a universe like this, it adds to the fun to try and understand, to work it out. That was everything I wanted to say. If you enjoyed this video, then I would love you to subscribe to the channel, like the video if you liked it, dislike it if you did not, and let me know what you thought in the comments below. I would also like to thank my gold tier patrons and channel members: Queen Arby, Lewis, Oren X, Drakey Phoenix, Daniel Cal Drawings, 501st Clumboy, Ruben Mendoza, Imperial Embers, Canifex, Jimsy, Average Soul, Azu, Jonas, Yali Rodriguez, Detroit, Motzi, Brina Lee, Jacqueline Lavelle, King Jack, Lifeblood, Reaper Gaming, Mehmet, and Kai the Zin. What did you think of this topic? Which Left 4 Dead map do you always load up? And what would you like me to cover next? Let me know in the comments below. This is where our story ends. Check back soon for a new one.